What's it, Steve?
Good afternoon, Joe. How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Nice to see you again. It's been a little while.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
So, new subject today. This one we're calling Strategic Vision Tactical View. And I think in our prep for this, we've realised this is going to be another two-parter. So I guess that means this first one is going to be Strategic Vision. And in the second part, we'll talk about the tactical view. And the reason for that is that these two things are dimensions of the same aspect. They are two sides of the same coin, to use a very tired metaphor. But it's really that as someone involved in delivery leadership, you've got to hold a creative tension between two things happening at the same time. You've got the day-to-day job, which is often involves clients in face-to-face time, but you've also got to have a grand view of where you're going overall. And those two things are definitely often pulling at each other. The need to get stuck into the immediate things that are happening, the pressured things that are happening, trying to tame the chaos and bring order and calmness and consistency is very time consuming, but it also pulls you away from doing the big strategy stuff. So we're going to take that and unpack that as a conversation.
Yeah, because I know certainly for me, in a lot of my experience is people don't know how we're going to implement a strategy for change because we're too busy doing the day job. Do you want to, should I just park this project for now? Is that what you're saying? You know, the kinds of conversations that you'll often have with a bit of a stressed team. So it's about, your job is to make the time, is to give the team the space to actually start implementing some change. And I think generally when you start implementing change, you do it small to begin with. And I think once you get a little bit of momentum, then the rest will follow, because a little bit of change often frees up a little bit of capacity. And then you can start to use that capacity for change, and then it starts to snowball from there.
Exactly, yeah. And that's precisely what we're going to talk about in more depth in this conversation. And the reason for picking it up is that the role of the chief delivery officer or delivery director, whatever title you give to that role, requires you to do both of those things at the same time. You've got to see far ahead. You've got to determine where you're going and how you're going to get there. But you've also got to take one step at a time. You've got to understand what that path is that's been set and take every single step on that path without getting distracted, unnecessarily distracted, and without getting discouraged along the way. And so we're going to use overwork a little metaphor a little bit later on about altitudes of thinking. But I thought it would be interesting to start maybe with something from our own experience, our own stories. So, Steve, you were telling me something earlier on, which I thought would be a really good way of picturing this and describing it. So I wondered whether you could tell me about that again.
Oh, that was the metaphor. That wasn't a metaphor. It was an actual thing. So when people often talk about we need to take a step back and see the bigger picture. I used to work in a business which was an online retailer, but we also had a warehouse, sort of the bricks and mortar side of the business as well. And the warehouse was there. We had the kind of the customer service team in the office as well. And we had my sort of IT web kind of team in the office as well. So I could get down into the warehouse. I could be talking to the people who were sort of, picking up the orders, who were then picking the order, packing the order, checking the order, all the way through to getting that on the back of the wagon. But then I could literally take a step back. I would go back up into the office, which then looked down onto the warehouse, and you could actually see the orders going through the process. And if you were making any changes, or you could almost you could observe things happening within the warehouse. You could observe people tripping over each other, people within the warehouse having to walk too far to go pick up, between items that they were packing as part of an order. So it was a real sort of good way of sort of observing everything that goes on and having that big picture view in real time, and it was much easier to kind of talk. We were able as a team to kind of talk and point at the orders and the process that they were taking, and sort of pick up, the improvements there that we could make. And then they were actually able to chat those through with the people on the ground, literally on the ground doing the work, and then sort of then observe the impact of the changes that you were making as well. So yeah, it was nice for it not to be a metaphor and actually be implemented in practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does become a metaphor because I think that's how it would be really helpful to think about this subject as well, different altitudes of thinking. It's only possible to see the connection between all the things that are going on when you can stand on higher ground. And so we're going to use the metaphor of walking up a hill. I don't like battle kind of imagery, so we're going to talk about it in terms of a journey. It's not like a general overviewing a battle scene. It's a team going on a giant journey, but starting out by walking up the hill to get that large view, to take time to stand on the higher ground and get the long view, knowing that you've got to take the journey at ground level.
You're trying to avoid the battle in the first place, aren't you? You know, you don't want this to be a scrap all the time. Although it can often feel like that. I think it's about sort of just getting to getting up to the necessary height on the hill to see enough of the picture to be able to identify where the problems are and what needs to be fixed.
Yeah. I think there's a far more fundamental question, really, which is why do we need a delivery strategy in the first place? Why not just get on and do stuff? Famously, the Simon Sinek question, start with why. So, Steve, why do we need a delivery strategy?
Yeah, I don't know. Why do we need one? I think that's, literally, I think you should be asking why. There's we'll get into it shortly, but, root cause analysis, one of the approaches to that is to keep asking why, or the 5 whys, I think people call it. And it's always just kind of challenging rather than just doing something. You can give a team a task to do and just say, there's your task. That's what you've got to go and do. Just go and do it. If they just do that and they don't ask why, they can't make their own decisions. They don't understand why they're doing something in the first place, what the value is, the purpose, the problem that it's fixing, and so on. So I think it's always important to ask why before you start doing anything. Why do we need a delivery strategy? I mean, the delivery strategy is essentially going to be the service that you provide to a customer, and that service is your product. So that's kind of the face of the company. So, you need that service to look right. So for the service to look right, you need a whole delivery strategy wrapped around that to kind of determine how you're going to do something and how, what sort of quality of the product or service it is that you're providing to the client as well.
Yeah, it's that thing exactly, isn't it? Where do we want to be in 6, 12, 24 months? Where do we want to be as a delivery team, as a business overall? And why are we doing this stuff about how we're doing our stuff? What's the point of it in the first place?
Yeah, and the strategy as well, you have a way of working, and it also provides you straight away with things like how long something's going to take or how long you're going to dedicate to something. Then you start getting your measures, your metrics in. You've got something to be starting to base decisions on. So you're not just sort of finger in the air at this point. You can actually you're making conscious decisions based on metrics.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the point of it really is to help the business overall. The whole point of it is maybe to help scale. As the business grows, to help scale your capacity in what you can deliver, or in your capability, adding new capabilities to the team in order to be able to achieve more. It might be that the point of it is to make sure you can achieve those key objectives of the business. It might be, as you said there, with metrics, that you want to really understand what's going on underneath the surface and pointing at the things you want to be able to examine and interpret. It might be about ensuring you get consistency across the business or across projects. So you're not having those golden projects that go really, really well interspersed with projects that are chaotic or problematic. It definitely might be about building the reputation or improving the reputation of the business through that consistency and through that scaled capability.
Yeah, and I think you're looking at waste as well. We're talking very positively there about the things that have got to happen, but there's also, we need to be able to look like sort of review the process later on, or the strategy, and sort of understand where the waste is, because we're not going to be efficient from day one. There's going to be lots of little inefficiencies that we need to iron out. So I think it's being able to kind of look and sort of see what we need to take away from the strategy as well.
Yeah, and similarly, thinking about some of the negative things as well, it's also about knowing how you can deal with the risks that are impinging on that your part of the business, on your
Yeah.
projects, on the business as a whole. How are you going to handle those? What are those risks, and how are you going to handle those? Definitely, and the strategy can be a really strong part of that. And I will get to some more of describing some more of that, I think, when we talk more about going up the hill. What the point is of going up the hill.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, why do we need a delivery strategy? Because we need to know how we're going to get to where we're going, which I guess takes us to that real metaphor. So I've always thought of this literally as preparing for a big journey. If you stand on top of the hill, then you can see that the valley 5 miles across or 20 miles across. You get the idea.
Yeah. A long way.
Yes, exactly. You can see everything that's in between. You can see the crags, and you can see the rivers and the forests and the deserts, and obviously, I'm thinking magical wonderland of Lord of the Rings or something. But it's that kind of grand view.
That's essentially the start of your risk management as well, isn't it? We know we've got to ford that river over there. How we're going to do that, and then we know we've got something over here. We want to try and avoid this thing here. We can manage the risk over there as well, and we can start building that into the plan early on, and sort of we're planning for these risks, whether we're going to mitigate them, whether we're going to try and avoid them altogether. So yeah, I think that is one of the early benefits of having that sort of big picture view.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to contrast it very briefly, of course, when you're at ground level and you're on that journey, things can appear completely suddenly and erratically out of the blue. When you're progressing forward, suddenly there's the forest and you've got no idea how you're going to get through the forest. Suddenly there's a unfordable river and you haven't brought the equipment to get yourself across.
Yeah.
The horizon basically is so close that things hit you without warning. And so if you haven't had that hilltop view in the first place, you won't know that you need to take a rope bridge with you to ford the canyon. You don't ford a canyon. You ford through the river, but so the whole point is to get to that higher ground first of all, to be able to see the horizon that's further out, and gives you that longer view. It gives you a broader view in case you can see another path there that's going to be less problematic, taking that whole landscape, and so on.
But quite often, I think you'll find yourself, you're going to be going up and down the hill quite often, depending on the project, depending on the team that you've got delivering the project as well. If you've got a very capable and experienced team, it may well be that you stay up the hill a lot of the time. But when the team hits certain problems, they might need support, and you need to get yourself down the bottom of the hill to be helping out and help them benefit from your experience.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So to milk the metaphor just for a few minutes longer, that being on top of the hill helps you to keep focused on the end goal, to shape the journey all the way along. So you know the outcome that you want to get to, even if you can't go on a direct route there. You know where it is you're going. You can take account of the things that are immovable in between. You can't move the course of a river. You're going to have to go over it. But there might be other things that you can move in between. What's movable in the landscape? I guess big rocks. Trees.
Big rocks, trees, yeah.
Cut the trees down. Then you can evaluate the things that are moving. So if there is an army coming across, we really are milking this metaphor. if there's some sort of oppositional force, then you can see that it's happening there, understand that risk that it poses to your progress, and deal with it appropriately.
You've taken it back to a battle.
I know, I have. Yeah, weird. You can choose the optimum routes. Like I was saying, you can maybe adapt the route that you're going to find the right way to get there. If you don't have any people who are good at bridge building, don't take a route that needs to build bridges. You find some other way of going through there. You might have great canoeists. So let's find a good river for canoeing across. And then, of course, you can write a plan for how to get there, or write down what it is you can do. So it's not just you've got the idea in your head, but you actually do it sequentially. You've got things written out, and you can even, with any luck, test out that plan, so that you're not unduly surprised. You know, test out beforehand that you really do have people who can build bridges or can canoe, before you even get going on such a big adventure. Break the whole thing down into achievable steps, of course, is a really is a great power up to have. And know that you how you're going to get through those things when you've gone back down onto the plane, and you don't have that great vision when things are going to get tough, when things are going to get challenging, when you can get disappointed or discouraged with what you're progressing. That you've still got that plan to follow.
Yeah, they're the points at which you start learning and adapting. Though, so when you have that initial plan, and you know that these are going to be your epics or your milestones that you're gonna hit. It's not until you get closer to them that you understand the detail, and that's where the whole sort of empirical approach to delivery, that's where it all comes in, isn't it? So we're using our experience and our knowledge there, and all the lessons that we've learned, and we now have a bit more information about what the landscape looks like closer up, and then that's when we start to adapt as we get closer.
Yeah. And then my final thought I had on milking this metaphor completely, squeezing every bit of juice out of it, is you need to know the team you're going to take with you on that great journey. And you may not have them all at the beginning, but you might know that there's going to be villages and towns along the way where you can recruit people into your team. Ba-boom! Hooray! Or buy the equipment you need to take you on your journey. So there we go. That's the grand image.
Wrung the life out of that one.
Oh man, there we go. But the truth of the matter is, how do you get going? How do we? You and I have both done this in our various contexts. How do you actually get going on building a strategy? Especially, I was thinking, especially when you start in a new post and you come into business as usual, you come into that frenetic everyday work where there is client facing stuff. There are probably going to be things on fire. How you can't just have the wonderful, well, rarely have that wonderful thing of starting out on top of the hill. You have to get crack on with stuff. So what do we do about getting started? In your experience, Steve, how have you kind of got started on building your own strategy?
I think first off is sort of understanding what the current strategy is, what the current ways of working are, talking to the team, talking to individuals, what's working, what's not working, what is it that you're crying out for, what would be kind of, and then as well understanding what some sort of simple fixes might be, some low hanging fruit, if you like. But I would also always say, like, I would never go in somewhere and start trying to make changes straight away. I think because then you're not basing it on the big picture. I think you really need to get in there and properly understand how sort of the wider systems and everything hold together as well. Because it might be that your teams, there's going to be consequences for other teams if you start making changes here or you start changing the ways of working. So yeah, I think it's always important to understand how the delivery strategy for your team is working, and also understand the interfaces with other teams, with data, with other systems before you start making any changes. And then I think once you've kind of built up a picture of what that looks like, and in my experience, it often looks pretty horrible, even if it's quite a nice, even some big corporate organizations, that they tend to have this veneer that you see from the outside. And it's not until you kind of get under the skin of things that you realize that things are often hanging together with duct tape and whatever else. So yeah,
that reminds me actually of a recent position I had where I joined a young business, but one that was up and running, and they had existing client stuff going on with them. I joined when they were in the middle of a game changer project, one of those clients that were, really interesting, fascinating implementation of their skills and technologies. But it was pretty full on, really, really demanding. It was one that they were really lifting the lid, lifting the capacity, lifting the bar. That's the word, image I want. lifting the bar on what they were doing. But the client was really, really demanding with some very serious limitations that shaped the project in terms of, particularly in terms of a time boundary or time envelope that they had to develop this thing in. The Yeah, it was really, really challenging and came into the middle of it. And I think that they kind of saw me as coming in and saving the day and bringing some order to the chaos, but it was really, really, really full on. That was three really, so it was really full on from day one, really
Yeah.
intense. And I found it really hard. That was kind of coming bang into that ground level tactical kind of stuff, having to deal with stuff from the very outset, really challenging clients and challenging personalities in particular. And I definitely experienced what you were just talking about there of coming into the middle of things, lifting the lid a bit and finding out, yeah, okay, this is hanging together by gaffer tape and blue tack, and
Yeah.
it works, it's working,
Mhm.
but I don't know how to do the next part of it based
Yeah.
on the things that they've already got in place.
Just when you said they're bringing order to chaos, more often than not, when you start a new position like a CDO role, you're not going in somewhere because it's running really well. You're going in there because there are problems to solve.
Mm,
And I think one of the early wins you can get is just getting the confidence of the team, because usually by that point they're crying out for somebody to come in and take the lead and sort
mm,
of start implementing some positivity, because they're probably fighting against internal stakeholders. There's lots of shouting going on. They're reacting to the loudest voices and so on. So I think you getting in there, um, taking charge, sort of providing them with a little bit of protection, and then start to implement a delivery strategy. I think that's you're onto a real winner if you can carry that off.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was tough, and it continued to be tough for quite a while from starting that, because there was
Yeah,
a lot of doing that, a lot of asking questions of the people who'd been doing the job already to find out how they got to where they got to, whilst also wanting to free them up because they were the wrong people to be doing that day-to-day work. Some of the
yeah,
founders, particularly some of the intellectual founders who needed to take the product on.
mm,
It was really, really challenging. One of
yeah,
the things I took from that was I needed to walk up the hill. I needed to get out of that day-to-day stuff. So as soon as time was made available, I went away from the day-to-day. I took several, weeks out, in fact, it was, and did a whole bunch of research to understand how this business fitted in amongst its peers or
yeah,
aspirational peers, and to understand how they were doing their kind of stuff, to observe it from the outside, and can we replicate some of that stuff here? What's good about what they're doing over there?
yeah,
And yeah, it was absolutely vital. It was so difficult on that day to day, and it needed that time to get outside it.
yeah,
I think on that point, it's probably worth having a little pause here, and then we'll come back and we'll actually start dealing with the question that I asked a few minutes ago about how you get going. And we'll talk maybe about some of the specifics of building the basis of a strategy, and then filling it into something that's got enough detail to be a thoroughgoing strategy.
yeah.
But on that note, let's take a pause. So we're back. Here we go. And I think we're going to pick up the question that we were starting to look at before the break. How do you actually get going with building a strategy for delivery in your business? One of the things that I wanted to talk about, Steve, is something that you and I have done together in when that brief period when we were working together, which was something called problem sourcing. I
Mm,
really, really liked it. I found it a really helpful thing. I'd not done it before, but I've used it multiple times since then, and I think it's really powerful. There's loads of places where you can start to build your strategy, but problem sourcing is a great, great one. And it starts for me by having a fairly unjudgmental way of just saying this is a problem, without saying this is a problem that Steve did, or this is a problem that Joe created. It's just this is a problem, this is a difficulty, this is a challenge, this is a bottleneck, this is an obstacle, whatever. These are the things that are hard in how we do what we do. whether it might be projects start without objectives being clear, for example, or having no user needs, or we've completely lost users in it. So there's no user centricism in projects. No, that whole methodology is just absent. Or we might say that we've got an overcommitment issue, or there's all kinds of other things. Referring back to our to the previous episode, last episode, we talked about jazz. In it, there might be that there's not any room for any jazz in it, and so there's no improvement that comes through continuous learning and feedback and experimentation. There's just no space for it. There's all kinds of things. And so problem sourcing starts by saying, well, just let's get all of those problems out. And obviously, there could be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more, but getting all those problems out without pointing fingers, just describing them.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good way to agree collectively what the starting position needs to be. Once you've got those problems out there, if you've done those problem statements or just generally just problems, then you can start to kind of understand what the big problems are, where which problems were, if we unblock that problem, then it would lead to this, or it would enable something else to start happening instead. So yeah, it is a good way to kind of map it. I quite like it as a physical exercise as well, where you're in a room with a team. You have everybody has the sticky notes, and I quite like. You can do these things online, but I do quite like that as a kind of a physical exercise.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've seen it done both ways, and I've seen it done both ways combined into one, so that you give people some time to generate those problems in advance by having a form or whatever to to put them in, or an ice box to drop them in, or whatever. But also, like you say, having sticky notes and putting them together. The great thing about putting them on sticky notes and doing it together in a room is you can cluster them, which is really great when you see similar people from different parts of the business with a similar problem, kind of different views of the same problem expressed in different ways, and you start putting things together and saying, that's actually a far bigger thing than we ever thought it was, because five people have got this from a different angle.
And usually you get some good conversation from those things as well. It's a knock-on effect of this sometimes is for different teams, perhaps with sort of opposing objectives, start to understand each other as well. So it is a good way and a good reason to bring people together.
And then hopefully from those kind of conversations that's where you start to get to some analysis of what's going on, what the root cause is. So the clustering is part of that, isn't it? And then the conversations around the clustering are also kind of, well, what is the problem? Is it that when we do projects, we're sitting too close to the customer, and so we've got an overcommitment issue? Or is it that we're sitting too far away from the customer, and so customers are getting really pissed off with us because they think that we're exploiting them and not paying attention to their needs? Is it that we're running before we're walking, that we're too busy, too eager to get on with stuff, with putting spades in the ground, that we're not taking the time to plan, or all that sort of stuff? The image I really like using is that you have a one hammer and everything looks like a nail, and you just use this same hammer to hit everything with. Is it that the problem, or is it the personality bottlenecks? I've certainly found quite a few times where a founder in particular finds it really hard to remove themselves from the day-to-day stuff, because they enjoy being a designer or a programmer or whatever it is, and they just can't pull themselves back and have to get involved, have to have their opinion heard, and sign off always has to go through them and whatever.
And I think that's a good part of having a strategy is that within the strategy you have roles and responsibilities. And I think that's when you can then reiterate to the founder what their role and responsibility is within the context of delivery. You're going to get involved, but you're going to get involved at this stage here. So please sod off and let us get on with it, do our jobs, and then we'll involve you later on when we need you to be involved.
Yeah. And the consequence, because at this point we're just analysing that we're not getting to the kind of solution, but the solution is then the next step is, let's brainstorm and get as many solutions as we can possibly find, the obvious ones and the harebrained ones and everything in between that address those big problems, and then let's vote on what's doable. This is, I think, probably where, as you're saying, those post-it note exercises can be really powerful with that sort of thing.
You also get a common understanding as well, don't you? of what problems are, and I think priorities tease themselves out quite easily, quite naturally when
Yeah.
especially when you start to group these problems together. Suddenly, that you see that QA is actually the bottleneck. We've got the team's too big for QA for the size of the QA team to support, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you've got some obvious priorities and obvious solutions to the problem as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's the combination, is it, between the problem and the set of solutions, which determines how you get to the priority. Because it's not just what's the biggest problem, but
Yeah,
if it's a big problem, but also the solution is gigantic as well, then it's just going
yeah.
to take so long to implement it. Are there some easier things to address that are still significant problems, but maybe the solution is quite straightforward?
Because usually, like I think I mentioned it before, that you go after some of that low hanging fruit, and fixing those small problems can sometimes just start to free up enough capacity to
Yeah.
make some of the bigger changes more possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think problem sourcing can be a really, really, really great way to start addressing or start to think about how you're going to build a delivery strategy, because you're starting to
Yeah,
do that thing that we talked about in the first half of asking that why question.
yeah,
Why do we need to have this stuff in place? What is it we're particularly challenged with or struggling with, and we need to have a way of handling. There are other ways, of course. I'm intimated one in the first half of this episode where I went away and did a whole load of research comparing our business, my business, that one, with peer businesses or kind of the aspirational peer businesses where we wanted to position ourselves, to understand how they structured their organization for doing what they were doing, and how they position themselves for how the service delivery fitted into the business, and so on.
yeah.
And so that's another really, really strong way, I think. And not that they're mutually exclusive, and not that one's better than the other, but they all kind of fit into each other, don't they? These are effective things to fit
Yeah.
together.
And I have noticed as well that there's no one size fits all. I don't
Yeah,
think I could take any delivery strategy from any organization that I've worked in and apply it to another. There's obviously things that are central to delivery, but certainly every business is different, or different enough for you to need
yeah,
a whole new strategy each time. I think you've got, what your starting points generally are going to be, and kind of the fundamentals, but it's going to look very different each time you do one. And you have different problems as well, and you have different individuals, you have different business needs and different business goals, you have different clients, and you've got to kind of adapt to all of that as well.
yeah, exactly. And that's when I think we start moving towards thinking about what the processes are that we need in the strategy. So, like you say, there's going to be some fundamentals. It's going to be shaped by Agile, especially in digital delivery,
Yeah,
which is where our experience is. It's basically going to be Agile. But I've definitely experienced Agile being implemented in many different ways. And a lot of the ways that I've seen that have caused me most of a headache have been the ways where people have been using agile methods without using the agile framework. So, if I suppose what I'm talking about there is agile events, using
yeah,
sprints, having everything done in a sprint, and you have sprint planning at the beginning, and you have a bunch of tasks, and then you have a sprint review at the end, without really understanding what the point of agile is in the first place,
yeah,
why it's there. Those are just the elements, the components, the tools that are part of the process. But agile itself is designed to take really big and complex things and break it down into small chunks, and to say this is the absolute must-haves. Order it in some fashion, and this is how far down the order we've got to get to, or this is how far down the order our money gets us to, or this is how far down the order our time gets us to, or our capacity, or whatever the limitations are. And saying, well, how are we going to break that down into chunks so we can make sure that we can make progress? And then agile is, as I know I'm just repeating what we both know, but it's about adapting on the way that we understand this is where we're aiming to get to. We've got a strong inclination of how to get there, but there may be things we learn along the way we can take a shortcut or slightly different routes or whatever, to use that metaphor from earlier on about the journey, and adapt.
Yeah, and I think, quite often people hold retrospectives, but they don't really do anything with them. They just go through the process of having a retrospective, what went well, what didn't go so well, blah, blah, blah. But nobody then sort of takes some actions, implements any particular change, any sort of change off the back of them.
Yeah.
There's no improvement. You've just spent 1 or 2 hours in a retrospective for absolutely no reason. You've just gone through the motions. Again, no one's asking why when that's the case. No one's asking why we're having this retrospective. Why do we do it? What's the purpose? What we're going to get out of it, rather than just sitting here for 2 hours and basically doing nothing.
Yeah.
So you've got to be doing, or if you're going to be implementing a process, there's a reason. So when somebody says to you, "Why are we doing this?" you need to have an answer to that question.
Yeah,
exactly. Justify why we do anything. Again, it's all about sort of being more lean, get rid of the waste, and just doing what is necessary to get you where you need to get to.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that's I found really important, and maybe it's because we're talking about the multiple intelligences last time, but maybe that I resonate most with words, but I really like documentation for everything as much as possible. I know in the agile mindset, documentation, action is kind of supersedes documentation, but it's not to say that documentation isn't important. It's still important. It's just a in service of. And I think at the level of strategy, documentation is so important, because it's the plan that we were talking about in the first half of this episode. It's the way that how you're going to do what you're going to do, and why you're going to do it, how you're going to go about doing it.
Yeah, I mean,
I've referred to that documentation the whole way.
Yeah, you've got to document what the end goal is, because usually the end goal doesn't change, not very often, or it doesn't change fundamentally anyway. So if the team are making a decision about anything, anything related to the delivery, they need to know what that end goal is so they can make the right decision. So if you don't have that sort of mapped out, or you think you're going to allow that end goal to change all the time, you're never going to finish a journey. You're never going to get to the end of it. So yeah, I think absolutely certain things need to be documented.
Yeah,
as long as again, provided there's a reason for doing it and there's value in it.
Yeah, exactly. And it becomes then a way of starting to fill out the detail that you need for it to be a full-on strategy. It might be a very high level to begin with, but as you get into the tactical stuff, which we'll talk about in the next episode, then some of that documentation is the way of going about implementing the strategy overall.
Yeah, some of these things that we're delivering, they're big, and it can be difficult to visualize what it is that you're building. I know, I've had some projects before where we have printed out the frame, the wireframes for all of the different stages of a process, and it's good to sort of walk that through with the team. We'd use them in stand up, so people would actually say, the stand up and point at I'm at this point here. We're implementing this functionality, and somebody else would explain what they're doing, and you can. It was a good way to sort of bring it to life, rather than just looking at a Jira board, the backlog, and just kind of saying, sort of reading the stories off that you've been involved in. It's great to sort of visualize it sometimes as well. So I think documentation, the right documentation, can be quite powerful and be quite useful.
Yeah, exactly. From that, of course, comes the tools and the methods you're going to use, and loads of those will be the things we've been referring to already, the standard tools like the agile events and so on, understanding how you're going to manage tasks. And you might well have a well-known tool. We don't have to give any brand names, but there's loads of tools out there can do that sort of stuff. But what's most important about managing tasks is understanding the term velocity, how much you can get through in a given amount of time, given the people that you've got able to do it. When you can understand that velocity, then next time around how much you can commit to in order to keep going, to keep up the pace. And so the task management it is definitely about having the ability to inspect things, but it's also about understanding what's the pace we're performing at.
Yeah.
There's area, the whole area of risk management, which of course goes without saying, but you need some methodology for managing risks. And maybe we need an episode about that in due course, because that would be a really good subject to talk about. The standard thing of putting things in a table and then forgetting about the risks, and just dropping them into the abyss. Oh yeah, we've managed risks isn't really very effective, and there's lots of other really helpful
so many
ways.
people still do that. I'm always amazed, when I see that happening. That yes, we've got a risk log, great.
Yeah.
Where is it? We don't look at it very often. But again, I mean, these things that you're talking about here, these are sort of typical kind of project management tasks.
Yeah.
That need to be done.
It's what you should think about in the strategy to know for this particular team, this set of people, this business that we're in, this market that we're in, this set of clients. It's which of these tools and methods fit in the right way, and how are we going to go about forecasting? How are we going to go about planning resources? Yeah, of course, there is standard stuff, but these are the things that fit in. And I think, and the reason for talking about them in terms of the delivery strategy is that part of it, as we said in the first half, is about the business growing and scaling.
Yeah.
And as the business moves over the size thresholds that we referred to in previous episodes, but maybe you get over the £1 million turnover, or £10 million turnover, or £100 million turnover, whatever threshold is your next threshold, something needs to change. And that means that the tools that you use to do these tasks probably need to change, and the methodologies that you use, who uses them, how they're built into the life of delivery teams will change as you're growing.
Yeah, and they serve different purposes as well. I mean, especially things like reporting. That gets used in many different ways, especially as you're implementing products and services in bigger organizations, especially when you get the public sector level. It's the reporting side of things changes considerably compared to if you're in a 30, 40, 50 person organization.
Yeah. One of the key aspects of building out the strategy is understanding the ways of working that you're going to adopt in the team, because it's going to be different depending on, well, a whole load of stuff. Things we've mentioned, the size of the business, the sector of the business, the growth strategy of the business, and so on. Particularly the set of personalities you've got involved will determine some of the ways of working. If you've got a load of extroverts who need to talk things out, or you've got a load of introverts who need to spend time away thinking and so on, and need something structured to gather themselves together, then you have different ways of working depending on that. And then the most important thing that's going to be part of this delivery strategy is well, the most important thing. One of the key components is metrics. What are you going to measure and why?
Yeah. What gets measured gets managed, I think, is which I've heard before. For me, data is key in terms of providing evidence, and quite often it's the evidence that you then use to base your decisions on as well. You can't argue with the numbers in front of you in terms of this is what we've done and this is what we haven't done. That's what it cost, and that's how much money's left. And then you've got to make decisions based on that.
Yeah. There's a lot there, isn't there, about determining the right things to measure in the first place. And maybe we could talk about that in a future episode. But you're absolutely right. What gets measured gets managed. You want to manage things. You want to know that you're measuring the right things in order to do it. But it's that bit which then gives you the feedback process that you need. If you've got the metrics that allows you to inspect things, you can get feedback and learn from what that feedback is. About how you're going, how you're progressing along the way. It's like mile markers, to go back to our metaphor from the first half, isn't it? What are the mileposts along the way? Are we actually getting to them at the pace that we expect to? Will we get to the camp at sunset? And so on.
But they're also a good way of, when clients start pushing for more and more things to add in, especially later on in the project, if you've got the numbers to back up what you're telling them, that's pretty powerful, because then the conversation where you normally say, okay, you can have this or you can have that, you can't have both.
Yeah.
Because look at the numbers, it doesn't add up. it makes those conversations a lot easier when you've got the numbers to kind of back up your argument. And then you're putting the onus on the client to make the decision whether they want A or they want B. So I think, for me, metrics are a huge thing. But like you say, you don't want to take it too far. You want to measure what's necessary. Otherwise, you start putting more pressure on the team to be capturing more data. And it's, obviously, as soon as the data gets, as soon as you start capturing, you're not capturing enough data, or you miss a few days here and there, then the reports become pointless, essentially.
One of the CEOs that I spoke to earlier in the year, he was a CEO of an enterprise WordPress agency. He actually made some of these metrics public, particularly for their clients, to I think prospective clients in particular, as part of their kind of marketing strategy.
Wow.
So this is a way to this is the way that we keep track of ourselves to make sure we're on target, but we make these bits of it available for you so that you can have confidence in what we're doing. It was part of his marketing strategy, because in particular he was himself originally from an enterprise background, and he knew having an agency servicing enterprise, the enterprise wanted to be confident, and metrics is a way to build confidence. So it was really impressive. I really like that.
Metrics they tell a good story. Well, hopefully, if you're doing your job right, it hasn't all gone wrong, then, the metrics can tell a really good story, a really strong story about, you providing direction and support for your team, giving your team that sort of environment to thrive, and then the team achieving massive things. Then all your graphs are pointing in the right direction, and there's a great story that you can put out to people, and also play it back to your team as well to say, look where you started with the numbers, look where the numbers are now. It was you that made that happen. So I think, there's metrics, usually they're for stakeholders, but actually, think about how you might use them to play things back to the team, especially when the team have had a hard time. Quite nice to say, but look what you did achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like a key result. Definitely. Yeah. Steve, we've had a really thorough discussion today, and I think it's probably a good place to put a pin in this two-parter. And the reason why we've talked about strategy, first of all, is that tactics, which we'll talk about in the next episode, should always come from the strategy itself. The tactics being the things that you're doing at the ground level to implement the strategy, the things you're doing in the day-to-day. They're fairly impotent if they aren't built on the strategy that comes first. So we've spent a lot of time today talking about strategy. And I think it's been a really useful context. We've had a few real world stories, and we've talked in particular about why we need a delivery strategy, what it is we're doing, how what we're thinking about for 12 months time or 24 months time, where we want to be. We had this metaphor that we really squeezed the life out of, walking up the hill to see the horizon. And we'll return to that definitely next time, because I'm sure there's still some life in it.
Oh, there's loads wouldn't get out of that yet.
Absolutely. And then we talked lots about how you might actually go about doing, including problem sourcing and thinking about processes and tools and ways of working, and importantly, metrics. On that note, I think we can call it a day.
I think we're done, yeah.
It's been a really good chat.
That's been good. Thank you again, Joe.
Thank you again, Steve.
And I look forward to part 2.
Me too. Bye for now.
See you then.